What if I told you that the most powerful leadership lesson comes not from an MBA program, but from watching planes take off and land as a child on an Air Force base? Welcome to Talent Talks. We're exploring something that's reshaping how we think about leadership in our rapidly changing world. How to lead people who are not like us. Emily is joined by Stephanie Chung, a true trailblazer who embodies what it means to rise through authentic leadership. Stephanie literally went from the baggage room to the boardroom, becoming the first African-American woman president to lead a major private aviation company. But here's what makes her story so compelling. She didn't just break barriers, she created a framework for others to follow. Today, we're diving into what Stephanie calls ALLY leadership, not allyship, but a strategic approach to leading diverse teams that drives real results. We'll explore her EARN system, why psychological safety isn't just an HR buzzword, but a business imperative, and how curiosity might be the most underrated leadership skill. But here's what I love most about this conversation. Stephanie doesn't just talk theory. She shares the practical, observable steps any leader can take starting today. Because as she puts it, leading people who are not like you isn't charity, it's strategy. This conversation is for every leader who's looked around their meeting room and wondered if they're missing perspectives that could transform their results. It's for anyone who's felt the weight of leading in a world where 6 generations are working side by side, where the workforce is more diverse than ever, and where the old playbooks simply don't apply anymore. Let's explore what it really takes to create environments where everyone can contribute their best work.
Thank you for joining us today on another episode of Talent Talks. I am your host, Emily Alvarez, and I am very excited to be joined by our guest, Stephanie Chung. She is joining us from Texas today, the Dallas area, and Stephanie is a true force of nature. She's going to tell us a little bit about herself here in a minute, but Stephanie is an absolute transformational business leader, former president of JetSuite, founding chief growth officer at Wheels Up, and the first African-American woman president to lead a major private aviation company, which is super cool. Very excited to have you here. You also have your company, Stephanie Chung and Associates, where you work with keynote speaking, change leadership. And that's why we're here today, to talk about change leadership and the lens in which you see it through, which is a very beautiful lens. So Stephanie, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Of course, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you. This is going to be a
Yes.
fun conversation, Emily. I can already tell.
So excited. Yeah, we're going to talk about corporate leadership, but also the lens of how to lead people who are not like you, which is also the title of your book. And we sometimes in leadership positions get into most of the time get into situations where we are around a lot of different types of people, and that can be a challenge. But before we get into all of that fun stuff, tell us a little bit about yourself, Stephanie, and like how you kind of got to where you are today and the lens in which you see leadership through, because it really is a lens that is very special.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So,
Yeah,
as you mentioned, I actually come from the aviation industry. I always like to say I started off in the baggage room and ended up in the boardroom, and learned
love
a
it.
lot of lessons in between, right?
Right.
But so I always want to give tribute where tribute belongs, which is my dad was a master sergeant in the U.S. Air Force, Emily, and so I grew up a military brat. I was that kid that moved every couple years of my life. And I grew
Yeah,
up on active Air Force bases. And so I literally grew up hearing planes take off and land my entire life since
love
birth,
it.
right?
Yeah.
And so therefore, I knew early on what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be in aviation. So the very first job that I ever had was parking planes and loading luggage at the Boston Logan Airport. I absolutely loved that job. Like if I could still make the kind of money I need today, I'd still do that job. It
Right.
was so fun. And but in order to make extra money back in that day, I would actually go work upstairs at the ticket counter as well to bring in extra money. So I worked at
Right.
baggage claim during the day, ticket counter at night, checking customers in for their flights. Then from there was a gentleman who worked as one of our executives for the airline that I worked for, and he had been observing me, unbeknownst to me. And so he said to me one day, he said, "You know, Steph, I think we have you in the wrong position. I think you should be in sales. You've got a great personality. You serve customers with a smile on your face. You're so pleasant, blah, blah, blah. You should come
Right.
into sales." And so I moved then into sales. So I sold for the airlines for many years, then got recruited into private aviation and sold in the private aviation space for many, many years. then became the first Black person to oversee a private aviation company when I was the president of Jet Suite. So made history there. And then
Wow.
then went over to Wheels Up, was part of the team that helped take that company public. That was the first private aviation company to ever go
Right.
public. So that was a lot of fun. And I was the chief growth officer there. And then now what I do is I run my own business. Like you said, I'm pretty much, for the most part, I'm always on stage, keynoting to Fortune
Right.
500 companies, talking about leadership and things relating to leadership, as well as I've written a book, and I'm also on a aerospace board, a publicly held company called XTI. So I'm on their advisory board as well. So I literally am baggage girl to boardroom,
I
and
love it.
everything in between. So we'll talk about all that, I'm sure. But that's my story.
Yep. That's so cool. Yeah. And I mean, talk about literally starting from the ground up, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is really the importance of the lens in which you see things through, because your story is not much different than mine. I started as an intern, right? And worked my way up to a development position,
Mhm.
managing thousands of units of
Yeah.
doing development, right, for a company. And so when you work your way all the way up and you're in rooms with different people and you're not siloed like that, it gives you a totally different perspective, because you get to see how everything fits together. So it's like a puzzle, but you also get to take a look at the feedback all the way through the process, because you're hearing what people are telling you about the product throughout the process. And so that becomes extremely important too, because it makes you aware of your blind spots so that you can address them. And a good leader will not just ignore those or sweep them under the rug, because we know that that can be a huge, huge detriment, to
That's right.
sometimes catastrophic detriment, if we do those things. And so, let's talk a little bit about how the how coming from that ground up, when you got to having the seat at the table, right?
Mhm.
Because a lot of people make that transition, but they get to the table and then no one really tells them the truth about like what leadership is like once they get there, right? Especially
Yeah.
being a woman of color, a diverse background, right? Like, we're already like, sometimes women or from different backgrounds, like we're already in the minority,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And especially in an industry like aviation, mine was manufacturing, like
Hmm.
that, those are male dominated traditionally industries, right?
Yeah.
And so no one tells us what it's going to be like when we get to the table. It's
That's
like
right.
it's almost like being in a foreign country and not knowing what to do, right? So what happened when you got there?
Well, it's funny. As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, if they told us, Emily, would we want to be at the table? Right? Like,
Good
it's almost a
question.
blessing in disguise that we don't know. We just get to the table, we
No,
claw away there,
that
we
is
get there,
true.
and
Yeah,
then we're like, okay, woo, this is not what I anticipated. And so
right,
now we have to dig out a different part of us that we probably didn't know existed until
right,
we got into that situation. So,
right.
I say that just for all of your listeners, because a lot of times we do, and you and I will do a good job today, I'm sure, trying to paint the picture for people to have at least a clue when they get in those rooms. But also
Right.
know that we're not going to be able to paint the whole picture. I mean, we're only talking for an hour. So when you get to that room, no, regardless of who you are, but especially if you're a woman,
Yeah,
just know it's going to be different than what you ever expected or what you
right,
have ever been told. And this is going to be one of those moments where you have to make a decision. What are you made of? Right?
right.
That's
Yep.
that's the that's the telling moment. So, anyways, though, to answer your question, leadership, not only do people not prepare us for being at the table, people usually don't prepare us for being a leader, right? Long before you get to the table, you still have to be a really effective leader. So, really, what is leadership these days, right? And
Right.
everybody's got a different interpretation, and there's not a one size fits all, and people will determine what leadership means to them throughout their journey. But for me, I count myself blessed, Emily,
Yeah.
because I grew up a military brat. And
Yes.
we could argue, but I think that we've got the best men and women in the armed services throughout the whole world. And so leadership is something that I saw as a little girl. And I would not have been able to call it leadership because I didn't know. But as
Right.
a grown woman now, I can very much say I saw leadership from early on. And because of that, I respect it so much.
Right.
So whether it is cause and effect, right? I'll give you an example. Growing up a military child, during my
Yes.
teenage years, let's say, when you grow up on a military base, all military brats know this. We are accountable based on whichever parent is in the military. So in my case, it was my father. But if I
Right.
was caught speeding on base, let's say, it wasn't me who was, I mean, I got in trouble eventually, but it was
Right.
my father that was brought
Dad got in trouble.
into
Yes. Yep.
exactly into the commander's office to have to, explain and justify
Right.
what all happened, based on the decisions that I made.
Right.
Now, I say that because as a leader, when we think about raising and developing our teams, they are an extension of you. And it's important that they realize that
Right.
because, and that's whenever I take over a new team, Emily, the very first day, I have the same exact conversation with every single team I've ever overtaken or overseen. And I always say this one thing: on this team, you will be your brother and sister's keeper. We're either going to all win this together or we're going to all lose together. There is no I and superstars in here. We're all a team. And that way I
Right.
want to mark the territory so that they're well aware that we're going to survive this thing together, right? And we're
Yeah.
and so that you set the expectation, because if you are a really great leader and you've created a really great team, the team is all looking out for each other and they're looking out for
Right.
you, and you yourself are looking out for each of them as well. And so it's an interesting balance, but leadership was never meant to be done alone.
No,
And
it wasn't.
yeah,
Absolutely. Well,
you
and
know,
it's sort of similar to being in like wartime, peacetime,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And e- every team, every company goes through those periods
yeah.
of influx of like we're at war, we're at peace, we're at war, we're at peace.
Mhm.
The trick is when you're at war, not to overreact
Mhm.
and to be able to prioritize the noise, right? Because there will always be noise.
Right,
But at the same time, when you're at peacetime, don't get too comfortable and don't get too grandiose in thinking that wartime will never happen again.
right. That's right.
Because, once you get into that mentality of like, oh, it'll never happen again, or it won't
Mhm.
happen to me, or I'm too big to fail, or I'm too big to do this. Famous last words, you will become a cautionary tale almost overnight. It is like some sort of weird universal situation that happens, I swear.
Well,
Might not
think
happen
about
overnight, but
that's
like
right.
literally overnight. I'm not saying like physically, but overnight,
Mhm.
like in the next, like, your company it'll eventually happen to whatever.
That's right.
Insert scenario here.
Yeah.
But I think
And
where we're talking about is accountability, right?
yes, that's right.
And accountability is kind.
Mhm.
And if we can't all see the greater purpose and be guided towards that greater purpose together, it doesn't matter if one of us wins, if
Right.
the rest of us fail, because what's good for the goose is not good for the gander if we all can't share in that piece. Like this
That's right.
doesn't work that way. That we might
That's
as well
right.
be, it's like a communism type of or socialism type of a mentality, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you can't have a I win and you lose mentality,
Yeah,
right? So it goes
exactly.
back to when you think of accountability, as you were talking, one of the things that came to my mind was about when you're in that season, right? So you're calling it, war and peace, seed time and harvest, whatever. When you're in
Yeah,
that season, when things are calm, right? And you get a minute to like breathe for a second because you're
right.
not in war. But that's usually the time when the best, we'll take athletes. The best athletes train during the off season, right? When
Yes.
things are
Yes.
calm, they have a chance to breathe. That's
Right.
when we, as well, leaders should be training as well, because
Absolutely.
you're in the wartime. You don't have time to train. In the wartime, you need to be trained,
Right.
right? Like you already need to know how to do
Yeah.
this. This is not the time for training. So when you have the opportunity to have some downtime, that's when
Right.
you kind of like, okay, celebrate the wins, but then also figure out what's that next thing I've got to get ready for or get the team ready for, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
you train during the off season. And it's true for athletes, and it's true for, listen, we as leaders, we're athletes as well. We don't use our body, we use our brain.
Mental
Same
athlete.
discipline
Yep.
though, right? We're still athletic as well. And so I love the analogy that you were giving, because as you were talking, I was literally thinking about that. And even our military does that, right? In the war, they try and train stuff. Special forces spends most of their time training. They
Yes.
don't have to, they're not doing a lot of stuff. They're doing training, right?
Right.
So that
Right.
the one time they got to get it 100% right, they're ready,
Right.
And so, anyways, that's what I want leaders to be thinking about. Listen, leadership is hard right now.
It is
And,
very hard.
if you have a time right now that you've got the potential to have a little bit of breathing room, use that time. I plan into my schedule, Emily, thinking time.
Yeah.
My
Yes.
my team knows, okay, we need to give her time to be able to just think. There's a lot going. I'm a thought leader. I need to think, right?
Right.
So,
This is what I'm here for.
this is what I'm here for. I can't be
Right.
on stage and doing all kinds of stuff all the time. Somewhere along the line, I've got to take. It's a discipline. It's an accountability, right? If you want to
Right.
be really, really good at what you do, we as leaders sometimes we save ourselves for last, and that's not good. It's not good in your home life. It's not good in your business life. As a leader, there's a
Yes.
lot of responsibilities that you have, a lot of people pulling on you, and so you must replenish your cup. And most of us are not very good at that. I had to learn it the hard way, but most of us are not good. And I really want leaders to listen. This world is crazy right now. It
Right.
really is, and leading is really tough. And so you must spend the time to do whatever it takes for you to get yourself back at the top of your game.
Yeah, I love that that's very beautifully said. And I think we do not take the time, you're right, to refill our cup. Or when we do refill our cup, we don't do it in a consistent manner.
Right.
Or we fill it with stuff that's not healthy for us.
Yeah.
Um, and so but what I mean by not filling it like consistently is like some Americans are terrible about this, but we take like, if you think about it, we take vacation like once a year, right?
Yeah.
And we, I read a really disturbing statistic the other day that said like 56% of Americans that have PTO don't even take it
Mm,
because they feel like if they do, they're going to get too far behind in their work, which is a whole other problem.
yeah.
Not going to get into today, but like most people feel like they can't even step away long enough to do their vacation time and spend that time with their families. Europe, they take like 2 months off every year,
Right.
like two
Yeah.
consecutive months off. And I know this because I used to have to ship fabric from Europe and we would have to plan for that because the entire country would shut down for 2 months or the
Yep.
entire continent, right? So
Yes.
we had to plan into that. But I think we don't take that time to iterate what healthy time management and growth looks like and what that slow down and recharge time looks like.
That's right.
We don't our recharge time is let me look at my phone before I go to bed and let me
Yeah.
check my Facebook, let me maybe, do a workout, but we don't really like iterate it in ways that take care of ourselves, most of us. And
Right.
I've noticed that I mean, corporate leadership obviously has a ton on their plate, but it's about shifting rhythm
Yes.
and saying, look, I've got to take a step. And you're right, during those downtimes is when that type of shift is the necessary time to take place because people are not stressed during that
Hmm.
time.
Yep.
And you can introduce these iterations in slowly. Doesn't have to
Right.
be introduced like bite the whole elephant, eat the whole elephant in one bite. You can just do little things and generally. But the other thing too is I believe that most leadership doesn't take the time
Mhm.
to find out where the commonalities are in their underlying culture in their company.
Yeah.
And so therefore there's a misunderstanding and a trust that doesn't ever get fully established. So therefore their employees don't buy in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
this
it's kind of,
downtime is a time to do it, right?
that's right. That's right. To reset,
Right.
right? And
Yes.
I love what you said. Don't that by eating the elephant one piece at a time. My daughter is her and her husband are expecting their first child, and
Right.
when any of us who've been parents, the minute that baby is born, you're going to have to start making adjustments because you
Oh yeah.
thinking you're going to sleep through the night, it's not happening for a
Have
little
fun
bit,
with that.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's during those times that you have to reset because
Right.
these two things are no longer the same. And the same is true back to your point in leadership. Listen, right now in leadership, and I know that you know this because we've talked about this before, there are 6 generations at work.
Yes.
That
Yep.
is unheard of. And
Yep.
each generation has a different perspective, different expectation, different way that they see work, right? So all the different generations at work are situation number one. Situation number two, we have women as the majority of the population. So that changes things because we women, we see things differently, we communicate differently, et
Right.
cetera. Then on top of that, we have colleagues that come from perhaps different cultures, may have a different worldview. And then you also may have colleagues that have disabilities or neurodiverse or part of the LGBTQ plus community. I mean, the list
Right.
goes on and on and on. The reason why I bring that up is to say that everything, and that's just the people part of it, right?
Right.
That's not
Yeah.
tariffs, that's not geopolitical stuff, that's not
Right.
wars,
All the other
rumors of
stuff
wars,
going on.
global war, like none of that
Yeah.
stuff. That's not even adding all that stuff. It's just adding our most important asset, the people part of it. Now,
Right.
if you're a leader and are not accountable enough to yourself to be able to figure out, put it in your schedule, do whatever you got to do to figure out some time that you can replenish, then when
Right.
you think about all the demands that are new that were not here, 2, 3 years ago, right? As leaders, and
Yeah.
again, I'm just talking about the people stuff, not all the other stuff going on.
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah, exactly. If you can't figure out a time how to get yourself replenished with all these new dynamics, then you're going to, I guarantee you, burn out.
Yep.
You're not going to be a very good leader that develops other people because you just won't have time. And you're going to
Right.
be running around like your hair is on fire because there's a lot going on in leadership. And
Right.
so that's what, leadership doesn't, it's not about overseeing people all the time. Sometimes it's about just overseeing yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
how do you make sure that you drop the excuses? Because I know I had lots of them, right? I'm like, oh, I'm too busy. Oh, I'm this. Oh, I'm that. All that
Right.
stuff is, it's just not good. It's not healthy. I unfortunately ended up getting cancer because I was so stressed out. My body was in such a
Stressed out. Yeah.
cortisol, state of mind. I don't
Yeah.
want people to do that. You shouldn't have to be, given a death sentence in order to go, oh, whoa, wait a minute. Okay, I need to change some things. So
Right.
right now, with everything that leaders have going on, you really do have to suck it up, buttercup. You got to like literally make a decision that
Right.
you realize that if you drop dead tomorrow, your company would still move on without you. Oh my God. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Life still goes on. People might be sad for a minute, but nothing will change for the business. It will still
Right.
go on. And so what you as a leader have to do, because knowing that we oversee people, we're responsible for them, we want to grow, develop them, help them be figure out their gifts and talents so that they can be really great assets, right?
Right.
Um, all that is going to require a lot of different things from leadership. So I'm not trying to minimize it, but you won't be able to be in a position to give any of it if you're burnt out, and we will lose good leaders. We're already losing good leaders. We're
We
losing,
already
listen,
are.
we already lost 450,000 women, right? Women like, I'm out of here. So there's just a lot going on. So the ones that are still remaining, they've got to figure out how to do this and do it in a way that's going to be conducive for them and their family and their health. And
Right.
yes, of course, for the job as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. And it's going to take conversation. Right.
yeah.
And that the thing I was reflecting on with all of this change that's coming, right, is the hard part is the people part.
Oh, that's the hardest.
That's the hardest
It
part.
really is the
So
hardest.
what's going to have to happen is these companies are going to have to address it first.
Yeah.
That's the starting point, right? It's not going to be the tech.
Right.
It's not going to be the law. It's not going to be whatever's going on in politics.
Right.
It's not whatever's going on between the left and the right.
Right.
It's not what's going on in your city. It's all that stuff is the noise I'm talking about, that you're talking about. That's the noise.
Yeah.
The stuff that's important is the stuff going on in our companies. That is the ecosystem of our companies. And you're right. If, heaven forbid, someone drops dead that's in a leadership position, or they leave the company, or insert scenario here, or they're not there anymore, a lot of times the company will actually thrive. And again, I'm not putting down leadership, but a lot of times leadership is the issue because
Mm,
of ego, because of being stuck in old archaic processes that don't evolve, because they refuse, like you said, to get out of like the generational, like this is the way we've always done it.
yeah.
And there's all of that type of like, no one's going to come in here and take over my territory kind of a thing. No, I don't want to look at AI because it might take my job. There's that fear coming in, technology. There's a lot of like noise that's going on with psychological safety around
Yeah.
stuff too. And so that's the stuff that needs to get addressed. Leave all that other crap alone because none of that other stuff is going to matter if your people aren't right in the head, and you've got to be in a certain mindset to lead that. And I think HR is the one that's going to be responsible for leading that charge because this is all going to come down to compliance.
Yeah.
And it's all going to come down to policy, and it's all going to come down to change leadership initiative. And unfortunately, we have quite a lot of people that are sort of burying their heads in the sand about what's really going on in their organizations. And I
Mm,
think, like your book, How to Lead People Who Are Not Like You, I believe there's a lot of uncertainty because of lack of resources and training, and HR has not been the strategic position that it once was. But it also, we're afraid of each other. Like we don't know what to say to each other anymore. Like
yeah.
we're afraid I'm going to offend somebody, or if I don't diametrically agree with what you say, you're going to cancel me, or you're
Hmm.
going to go to HR and report me and I'm going to get in trouble. Or, there's a lot of like divisiveness, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when you've guided people through this, leading people who are not like let's just call it what it is, the middle-aged white guy, the
Mm-hmm.
middle-aged white guy CEO, which is probably the majority of like
People
what,
in leadership right now. Sure. Sure.
yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, that's what it is.
Hmm.
But what do you see? Because it takes a certain amount of courage,
It's a
I know,
lot.
to deal with these people because
Yeah.
there's an ego and
Yeah.
there's challenges that come with that to say like you got to get out of your own way, man.
Mhm. Yeah, what I have found is one of the reasons why I wrote the book is because I felt like there was a lot of books out there and it was really the books were geared towards white men, right? And the
Yeah,
book was kind of like, hey, here's how you lead women and people of color. And
yeah,
I think that's important, and certainly to your point, because they still have a majority of the leadership positions. But I
right.
also felt like we needed to go deeper and wider in the conversation. So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
wasn't
for
just
sure.
for men, right? And specifically
Right,
white men, how do they lead? It's like, no, all of us, how do we all lead people who are
right.
not like us, right? So that was
Smart.
the
Yeah,
first thing. So my focus is not, I always tell people this is definitely not a DEI book, it's a leadership book. Because
good.
if you're
Okay.
in leadership,
Yeah,
right now the whole world's global, right? We're all connected. And so
yeah.
if you're in leadership, you will lead people who are not like you for all the
Yes.
reasons I said earlier, whether it's
Yeah,
generationally or
right,
gender or, certainly, of course, race, but also communication style, right? Or thought process. If
right,
you come from a different culture, you have a different perspective on things. And so when I talk about diversity as far as teams, I'm not talking. I feel I get really most conversations have dumbed it down to just race, gender, and ethnic, right?
right,
Sexual orientation, perhaps. And so for me, it's like, no, no, no. Diversity really is people who think differently than you, see the world differently than you, communicate differently than you. Yes,
right.
probably look different than you,
Yeah,
have a different educational background, come from different social economics, so on and so forth. So all
right,
of it is diversity, right?
right.
And so the question becomes, how do I lead people who are not like me, which is pretty much everybody.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and so with that in mind, what I have found is, you hit it on the head earlier. A lot of it has to do with psychological safety. And
Right.
psychological safety is not a HR woo-woo word, right? Which is kind
Right.
of, again, how it's
It's
kind of been
become,
marketed
right.
out there. So
Yeah.
psychological safety, I come from aviation. Psychological safety is really important, right?
Yes.
Because we are in a no-fail type of industry. And
Yes.
so for us, psychological safety is not a new word. It's not a buzzword. It is a word we live by.
Right.
And so psychological safety simply means that people feel comfortable enough to share their thoughts, their ideas, and to challenge the status quo. That's all it
Right.
means, right? And so if we think of leadership in that way, and you're right, HR, this is their time to shine. If
Yes.
there is not a company on the planet that doesn't need HR more than ever. HR, unfortunately, a lot of times in companies have become kind of the compliance department. And
Yes.
though that's
Yep.
important, but we are way past that right now. Like we really need HR to be the right hand or the left hand of the CEO, like they were once upon a time.
Right.
Because the strategic direction of, because to your point, the most important part of this whole conversation in business is about the people. And the
Yeah.
people who know about the people are HR, right? And it's their job to actually teach everybody else about the people part of it, not the compliance
Exactly.
part, not the risk part. That you can certainly do, or have legal step in and help. But really, this is about the people part. Everybody has a labor shortage right now. Everybody's
Yes.
having this, how do I get them back to work conversation, right? Because most people are like, that's a deal breaker, I'm not coming back in, I'm remote, right? And then of
Right.
course
Exactly.
everyone is struggling with all the different challenges that are going on because the world is very different. So this is the HR time to shine. Like i'm
Yep.
i'm excited about the HR professional who goes like, I
Me
get
too.
it, put my cape on, let's go, right? Because this is my time. It's never been your time more than ever before. And if you miss the window, you may not get your time again, right? Because a lot of companies, HR is just HR, and
Right.
they're at the table, but they're at the table to make sure we're compliant. That's very different than what you and I are talking about.
Exactly.
And so,
Yep.
because we see all the differences in the workplace, and because if you look at any stat, right now the younger generation doesn't want to get into leadership. That's a horrible stat,
Right.
horrible for us leaders. We have employee engagement is at an all-time,
Low.
low, high, whatever you want to call it. People are just
Yep.
not engaged, and they're quietly quitting, still quietly resigning, right? And so the numbers are going in the wrong direction. We've got, I think the last number I saw, 450,000 women have left the workforce this year, right? So there's
Right.
just so many things going on that we really have to kind of step back and assess. So the companies that are not buying into the hype, but are actually going to put 10 toes down and lean into it because they believe in, their vision and why they exist. That's what this book was written for. I
Yeah.
wanted everyone to know this isn't a book to beat up the white guy. Like I have no interest in
No, and
that.
I didn't mean it like that.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was,
yeah. No, but I
yeah.
understand what you're saying. But this
Yeah.
book is really all about, listen, if you're in leadership, you better figure it out, because the people
Yeah.
who are not like you are not going
Yes.
away. And
Yeah.
so you as a leader, your leadership and developing them isn't
Yeah.
going away either. So you've got
Right.
some decisions to make. And
Sure.
so really what this book is like, I've only led teams that were not like me. And
Right.
yet I was able to get to the highest level. And
Yeah.
so it's almost like a love letter to leaders going, listen, this is how I did it. Step one, step two, step three, and in hopes that it will help them as well. They don't have to
Yeah.
do it the way I did it. Maybe there's some tools or some, little tricks of the trade that maybe they could take into account that may
Sure.
help them. But that's really why I wrote the book, is to really give them, and now let me go one step further. The title is called Ally Leadership: How to Lead People Who Are
Right.
Not Like You. Ally is an acronym. So it stands for Ask, Listen, Learn, You Take Action. That's the first thing. Because I could have
Awesome.
called it allyship,
Yeah.
but again, it's not a DEI book. I called it ally leadership because I believe that's the new way to lead. You must be a leader that knows how to ask questions you don't already know the answer to, because that's
Right.
that's most of the problem, right? Most leaders only ask
Yeah.
questions they know the answer to.
Exactly.
Ask questions you don't know the answer to, and then you listen. And if you do those two steps by default, Emily, you're going to learn. And
Yep.
now, once you've learned, you have a responsibility. The why is you take action. Nobody just needs you more informed. We need you more informed so you can execute, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's what ally leadership is all about. Now, that's the framework. Within the framework, and where I spend most of the time in the book talking about, is the system. The systems, how I've taken defunct teams and made them billion-dollar high performers.
Right.
It's because I had a system. And the system is called the EARN system, EARN. E stands for establish an environment where your people feel psychologically safe, which is what you and I are talking about. Then the
Right.
second part of that is A, assure alignment, right? So everybody in the company has to know, how does the company win? And more importantly,
Right.
how do I contribute to that win? So they got to know how to connect the dots. And then R is you got to rally your troops, right? Times are hard right now. I would say times are hard in these
Right.
streets right now, right? You got to rally
Yeah,
your
they
troops,
are.
get them excited to show up for something bigger than their task list. Why are we
Right.
here, right? And then
Right.
N is, to your point, the people part. I come from navigation, or I come from aviation, so navigation is important for us. So N
Yes.
means navigate.
Right.
And you would never in our industry, never have a pilot just show up and go, I don't really know where I'm going, but hey,
We'll
let's
see what
go
happens.
anyway. Yeah, it doesn't work that way, right? So you
Right.
have to navigate because you've got to plan accordingly. And that's what the N stands for, is the team needs to know, where's the company going and why? How are we going to get there and by when?
Right.
And then when turbulent times hit, because to your point, there's wartime and peacetime, they need to know, what's the backup plan. So that's
Right.
how you navigate the narrows. So that's the system that I literally spell out in all the pages and giving them examples of how to do all those things.
No, that's amazing. And yeah, I think there definitely is a need for a framework that looks at a system, putting this into an actual system, right?
Mhm.
Because the difference is we see a lot of framework out there that is just tactic
Yeah.
driven, right?
Mhm.
Which is the iteration.
Yeah.
And that's great, but we have to have something to tie it all together.
Yeah.
And I think where I've seen leadership really get something like this and kind of spun out is
Mhm.
they overthink it.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it's when you strip it down to the core,
Mhm.
it's pretty simple to follow. Where we get tripped up is we try to go from one iteration to the next and we get trapped in the noise in between.
Yes. Yeah.
Or we maybe don't succeed the first time or the second time, and so we give up.
Mhm. Yes.
And the other alternative to that is we get from like point A to point D,
Mhm. And
and
we're
then
exhausted.
we're exhausted, and yeah, we're exhausted, and we just like we stop with the consistency. And
Yes.
so it trickles off, and what really should be looked at is, look, we don't have to move the mountain, right?
Right. Mhm.
It's more about let's figure out some low lift
Mhm.
ways that we can iterate this. And what I've told other clients is figure out like some quick wins, right?
Yes.
Get
Mhm.
your teams believing in this, get them on board, get them buying in. But you have to talk to them about what they want
Yeah.
and what matters to them. And then that will give you some time to
Mhm.
think about bigger changes and dripping that consistency of your core values into everything you do. Because that's the big thing. If your core values are out of whack,
Yeah.
good luck implementing anything that's going to work.
Yeah. Or if you don't have core values.
Or if you don't have them. Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the other thing. But what I see is a lot of these companies, and I use the middle-aged white guy because my dad was a middle-aged white guy and he had a company. That's what I think of when I think of
That's your
middle-aged
point of
white guy.
reference.
My point of reference. But middle-aged white guy, like those are companies built on stability, right? That's what
Yeah.
I think of is like the stability model.
Yeah.
And then we have the younger generations, right, that they want the why.
Right.
Why?
Right.
And so if we don't give them that why, good luck getting them to buy in because it ain't happening,
Yep.
right? And
Right.
so that's the communication style you're referring to is like middle-aged white guy boomer is not going to want to tell Gen Z
Mhm.
why he just
Right.
told them to go do that.
Right. That's right.
He's not going to want to tell him that. And they're going to be like, well, why? Because I told you so. It's like dad talking to their kid.
Right.
But
That's
Gen
right.
Xer, because when my dad used to tell me to do something, I better go do it.
Right.
Or I got the wooden spoon.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure mine had a face drawn on it. So that's how often I got the wooden spoon. So,
Had
I
your
was,
face on it,
yeah, yeah, exactly. I was one of those kids, right? So, guilty. But yeah, I guess like that's the generation. It's kind of, I almost think of it satirically because it's
Yeah,
like I've spent a lot of my time being that translator between
right,
those generations. So it's like the middle-aged white guy and like the young Gen Z, just
right.
it's a comedy show. Like
Well, here's, yeah,
you keep showing up to the clown show, you're gonna get some clownery. Like that's what
yeah.
happens,
Yeah. And I
So
think your example of the different generations is really, really powerful
yeah,
because you're right. And and all of us can, I mean, now there's like comedy skits written out of these things
yeah.
because it's so, so apparent. And, one of the things that I always say is, you hit upon a couple really rich targets there. One was we overthink things, right?
Oh yeah,
And we overthink it or we fear it because if we make a mistake, we never live to live it down.
right,
Or you're right, people get on social media and just slaughter people because they made a mistake or what have you. And so
right.
we've got to all kind of step back and take a breath for a second, right?
Yeah,
And give people some grace. Because I used to have a boss that would say, you know, most people show up to work to want to do a good job. That's
yeah,
most people, right?
yeah,
And it's our job as leaders to make sure that we give them the tools necessary to help them get that small win, right?
right. Yeah,
But in regards to today's day and age, I think of it as a head and heart issue.
it
You're
is.
right. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. And right now it is so overcomplicated that people get exhausted just thinking about it.
Well, and
And
it's
they're
extreme
yeah, and
too.
it's extreme. And so because they get exhausted thinking about it, they don't actually do anything, but they're
Right.
exhausted because they thought so much about it that they feel like they did something and they actually never took the first step. So, just for your
Exactly.
listeners, let's make it really, really simple. Here's one thing that I would encourage all leaders who are listening to us to do. It's something they can do today, right? Because it's a head and heart issue, the first thing you have to realize is people that are not like you, they would much rather you talk to them if they can see your heart than you
Yep.
not talk to them at all. So let's just
Yes.
start with that. So
Yes.
assuming you're coming from a heart, assuming you're a normal functioning human being, right? You want everybody to win. You just don't know how to go about it. Right.
Right.
So I'm going to put that out there. That's the criteria that I'm working with.
Right.
So with that in mind, the very first thing you can do is you've got to realize like how curious am I about other people?
Yes.
Because
Yep.
if you're not curious, then the rest doesn't matter, right? You're not going to
Right.
be empathetic. You're not going to listen. You're not going to do a whole lot of things. So you got to start off with the mind of curiosity. And the analogy that I always give and is that if you go to another country, whether it's for business or vacation, a lot of times we go to these other countries and we're excited about it because we're
Yeah.
curious.
We want
We
to immerse
actually we
ourselves.
want to immerse ourselves so that we can
Yeah.
mentally grow, be mentally stimulated, try some
Yep.
new food, some new culture, whatever, right? That's
Yeah.
the whole reason we get on a plane and fly 10 hours someplace. But
Sure.
my thing for the leaders is you don't have to get on a plane and fly 10 hours. You can get in your car and drive 10 minutes and still get yourself in the same experience if you're curious enough, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
somewhere, unless you live way out in the sticks someplace, somewhere around where you live, you can go into a different environment that now not everybody looks like you, thinks like you, has the same background as you, may not even speak the same language as you, probably don't have the same
Yep.
food as you. Like there's a lot of
Right.
differences there. Are you curious enough to go into those environments and actually be a person who's going to ask questions you don't know the answer to, listen and learn? Are you curious enough? Because
Right.
that will be the first sign to tell you whether or not you can lead people who are not like you, right? Because this is the new norm and it's not
Yeah.
changing. So are you curious enough? And have that honest conversation with yourself. If you've
Yeah.
never been out of your town, you've never tried new food, you've never talked to anybody that doesn't look like you, think like you, and live in the same neighborhood, if that's you, then either you are going to become curious or you're not. And that's a
Right.
conversation you need to have with yourself. But if you
Right.
choose not to, just know the train's left the station, right? And so
Long time ago.
yeah, a long
Yeah.
time ago. And so nothing's going back to the way you want it to do. Train's already left the station.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Now, here's some things that leaders can do that are really simple. First of all, I always tell leaders, you're the leader. So what I want you to do is just for this next week, just observe the meetings that you're in. I mean, you're the leader, right? Leaders are built different. They should be built differently. So every meeting that you're in, just observe it. is this meeting packed full of people who think like me, look like me, act like me, have the same, background as me?
Right.
Or is the room, with people who actually I have like very little in common with, right?
Right.
So that's the first thing. So really you're looking at the meeting to figure out what's not there, not necessarily who's not there, what's
Right.
not there, right? What
Sure.
kind of
Yeah.
different thought is not there? What kind of different communication styles are not there? That's the first thing. Then once you realize that, then you start to go, okay, well, maybe in the next sets of meetings, I need to figure out how I strategically make sure that we do have difference of thoughts and ideas and communication style and all that. So that's first thing, is just be aware and observe. Second
Right.
thing is, if you have one person, we'll just use a woman because it's just easy for my conversation here. But if you have a meeting and everybody is all men, let's say, and then you have one woman, well, what happens when that one woman speaks? Again, you and the leader, just observe. Does
Right.
she speak, right? If she does speak, because if she doesn't speak, that's issue number one. If she does
Right.
speak, then what happens when she says something? How does everybody else respond? Do they take it seriously? Do they not take it seriously? Do they talk over her? Do they ignore it? Do they say she got a bad idea? What's happening in the dynamics when that one person who's not like everybody else actually says something? Just observe
Smart.
it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So now, and by the way, I'm not telling leaders to do anything, no heavy lifting. I'm just telling you to pay attention to your attention. That's literally all I'm saying, right?
Right.
And so now, if you're doing all of that, then it's like, okay, this is great. Now, what's that next thing, right? So I've paid attention what's not in the room. I've paid attention that if something or someone is different, says something, how does everybody respond? And now I've asked, I've listened, I've learned, I've paid attention. Now I can do something about it. And
Yes.
that's all I'm asking you to do. It is your meeting. You're the leader, right? Because you have the ability to make the different changes. What I don't do is tell leaders, here's the 10 steps of what you got to do, because I'm relying on the leader being the leader. You create
Right.
strategies all day. You know how to drive revenue, cut costs, like you're the leader. So you don't need this 10-step process.
No,
You
you
just
don't.
need to pay attention to your attention. And then you trust yourself to know that, okay, now that I've noticed, like, wow, everybody in this meeting is exactly like me. By the way, this is really important too, Emily. You may have people that don't look like you, so they could be diverse. Let's say you
Yeah.
got every color on the rainbow in that room. But if
Right.
they still think like you and talk like you've trained them to be mini yous, you still have a problem. So that yes,
Big
they could
problem.
be ethnically diverse, but
Big
not
problem.
mentally diverse, right?
Big problem. Yeah.
And so don't get hung up. That's why I say I don't like when people break it down and just make it a race, gender kind of thing. That's
Oh,
the
for
easy route,
sure.
right? It's
Yeah.
like differences are differences.
That's
And
why you
so
have to
as
talk to people.
that's why you got to talk to people. And that's why,
Right.
as leaders, it's like just start with paying attention. And then from there, I trust that you'll know what to do to change that up. What
Right.
other skill sets do I need in this room so that we can be more innovative, we can be faster, we can
Right.
challenge the status quo, challenge each other, which allows us to create a better product to get a better result,
Right.
right?
Well, and I would even take, I love that because I'm a very observant person.
Mhm.
I'm one of those weirdos that'll sit in like a coffee shop and just watch people. I'm sure they're like, what is happening? But I'll just like sit there and like watch.
Mhm.
But I like to observe people because their body language, their behaviors, like the way they talk, like just,
Mhm.
but you're right. Like if you watch people, because communication is only like 15% verbal.
Right. That's
The
right. That's
rest
right.
is all body language
Yeah.
and like the way we move and the way our eyes move and the way like
Yeah.
our head moves when we talk. It's all body language.
Yeah.
And so it's important to observe people too, because they will give you tells and signs about how they're
Yeah.
thinking and feeling without even speaking.
$100%.
Most of the way
Yeah.
they're thinking and feeling without speaking, which is why I hate text message too, because you
Mhm.
can never tell what the context is.
Right.
And so I would even um, I would start with what you're saying about observing and
Yeah.
listening and not waiting to interject your response, right? Really
Right. Right.
listen to what people
Yes.
are saying. There's a difference between hearing and listening.
Hmm.
The other thing I would challenge leaders to do is get yourself into some type of mastermind group, some
Yes.
type of like roundtable discussions, some type of resource around other leadership doesn't have to be in fact, I would recommend it's not your industry.
Yeah,
I
for
recommend they're
sure.
totally different people than you are with different opinions, mindsets of how they run their companies. Because I mean, I'm in Southern Utah. Like Utah's the MLM capital of the world. It's like
Mm-hmm.
everybody here has MLMs.
Yeah.
That's like all the businesses around here. And I'm
Wow.
like, just like the model, so all these guys like talk to each other about their MLMs. And I'm like, no wonder it's the only business around here, you
Yeah.
know?
Hmm.
But like, you got to be involved with other
Yeah.
people that think differently than you do and talk about their failures, their successes, because that's what true collaboration means. To your
Right.
point, like we're collaborating, we're getting
That's right.
involved in a discussion because we're not siloing ourselves. We're allowing this empathetic, operational empathy
Hmm.
to come through.
Yeah.
And that's the true beauty of leading people who are not like you, is being able to get to that empathetic stage and leading with that.
Yeah.
Because then leading people who are not like you is really not that challenging.
It really isn't.
Ah,
Think about it. We watch little
rewarding,
kids.
actually.
It's very rewarding. And by the way, so now let's get like to the grassroots of it, all right? When we watch little kids in playgrounds, Emily, they're doing it all day. They're
All the
asking
time.
why, right? They're asking questions. What's your name? Right? They're
How
listening,
did
they're
you do
learning.
that? Can you
How'd you
show
do?
me?
Yeah, exactly. And then
Yeah.
they're taking action. So we were born actually to do this. We were
Yes, we
born to
were.
do it. Life kind of smacks us around and all of a sudden we get a little apprehensive, right? But
Yep.
little kids do it all day, which means that instinctively we have it. And I actually talk about the science behind it in the book. We
Yeah.
instinctively have it in us. We just got to tap back into that. But the
Yes.
other side of it is, now let's just be practical. As leaders, we have a responsibility. We've got to get the right people in the right position to get the right result, because we answer to boards, investors, shareholders,
Yep.
whoever, right? And
Yeah.
so now the practical side of all this, because I think sometimes what happens too is people turn it off because they think, oh, it's just like a, warm and fuzzy kind of thing. And
Right.
so I'm going to put that aside for a second and just talk about, like, one of the things I always say, it's not about DEI, it's about ROI. So here are
Right.
some facts for the leaders to consider. If you want to be a leader worth your salt, if you want to increase your own marketability, you must know how to lead people who are not like you, because the world has changed and you don't
Yes, it
have an
has.
option,
Right.
period. Now,
Yep.
teams that don't think alike, look alike, have the same background, communicate the light, have the same generation, same genders, all that stuff, teams that
Yep.
are different, they are 70% more likely to improve and grow their market share from new markets. They
Right.
are 35% more productive. They
Yes,
are
they are.
36% more profitable. And they are 70% more innovative. So if you don't care about any of the fluffy stuff and you just want to be a leader that people are knocking down doors to come work for, or
Look at the
you want to
numbers.
be a leader that companies are like, oh, this person's ready because their stuff is solid,
Yep.
that's why you have teams that don't look alike, think alike, communicate alike, and have the same
Right.
gender, same generation, same. That's why you as a leader want to actually pride yourself in being able to lead people who are nothing like you,
Right.
because the numbers are clear. Don't take my word. Go and
Go
Google
look
it
it
all.
up. Yeah.
Go look it up. Harvard, Deloitte,
Gallup,
Kinsey, Gallup, there's enough
all over the
research on
place.
there
Yeah.
to tell you that teams that are not like you will simply outperform teams that are exactly like you. So
Yep.
diverse teams outperform traditional teams. So just from a sheer leadership perspective, if you want to go and continue to grow in your career, you have to know how to lead these teams of differences, because they're the team
Right.
that's going to get you the biggest, best, fastest result, which changes your marketability and your promotability. So that's if you just want to keep it just to the numbers.
Agreed. And also to kind of like say in that vein too,
Mm-hmm.
we all have to remember that we are not our customers. Our customers are diverse,
That's right.
right?
100%. Yeah.
So if we're not, I believe this to my core because I've managed big CX teams, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Our employees are our first customers.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that if your employees are not happy, generally your clients and your product suffers,
Yeah.
your services suffer, and your clients will reflect that. Like you can go look at your reviews and see this
That's
in
right.
act, but the other reason we love diversity is because we're not our clients,
Right.
but our clients depend on us to provide them with service. And so they want what fits them.
Right.
We have to keep that in mind. So when you have people that are diverse, they're trying the product, they're constantly using it.
Mhm.
So don't silo these people, let them collaborate. That's so important, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, you're right. Your employee base needs to look like your customer base. And
yes.
unless you have a customer base that, you only
They need to
want to
think like
serve
your customer base. Yeah,
100%. And yeah,
yeah,
and that's a really, really great point actually, because the world's just too big. Again, it's a global world, right? Everybody wants to be able to sell their product, all over the place. Most
right,
people anyway. Nobody wants to I just sell to this one group, right? It's just like
right.
that's a death sentence for your business. It just isn't scalable. It's not going to
Yeah,
grow, right?
yeah,
So I think, what I love about this part of the conversation is because I do get concerned that sometimes, at the beginning, once upon a time, people would think, oh, well, it's, as I speak for a living, and there's a saying that I talk about when I talk about this particular how to lead people who are not like you.
right.
Leading people who are not like you is not charity. Like for so long, people kind of puffed it up, like, all of a sudden there's like this charity thing. It's
That's
like,
because
no,
we messed around with the definition of
not
affirmative
like
action
you.
and DEI and
Yes,
all that
exactly,
crap. We
exactly.
bastardized what that means,
Yeah, and so leading
So
people who are not like you is not charity, it's strategy.
yes,
It's strategy. And if you're a leader, you should understand strategy. That's part of why you're being paid for the job, right?
yes,
And so anyway, so yes, it's the book is really all designed for, again, not to beat people up, because I didn't know, I did some things that I landed it perfectly, and I did some things that I just fell on my face, right? And
yeah,
I wanted to share all that in the book so that people can look and see themselves, and no matter who they are, see themselves there and go, okay, if she can do this, I can do this, right? And I make it
yeah.
incredibly simple of things that they can do, for the earn system to easily get their organization, and more importantly, get themselves as a leader, the type of leader that people start talking about and people then want to work for you. You shouldn't have a labor problem. You shouldn't.
Correct.
Leaders
Yeah,
that know how to lead all different types of people are knocking down the doors. They don't
yep,
just retain top talent, they attract top talent, right?
yes,
So
yep.
anyways, I could go on and on about that one, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's perfect, and I think that's a beautiful note to end on. And Stephanie, thank you again so much. You've been a lovely and wonderful guest. And you can follow Stephanie at Stephanie Chung and Associates. It's stephaniechung.com. They can also find you on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Read her book, Ally Leadership: How to Lead People Who Are Not Like You. And then also you have the Earn system and it's Stand Out and Move Up course, correct?
Yeah, for some of
I mean,
yes, we're really excited. So the earn system is an online training that you can take yourself.
right,
We did that because a lot of people bought the book and they're like, can I have more? And it's like, great, you can
right.
do this online training. It's very, very keeps it simple. And you can even bring your team into the equation if you'd like. And so all that can be found though at stephaniechung.com.
Awesome. Perfect. And then you're available obviously for keynotes, you're available for
Yes.
corporate leaderships,
Yeah.
one-on-ones, all of that. So touch base with her. Again, these episodes are a resource. Anybody that's on these episodes is available for chats, consulting, and reach out to myself or anybody on our team or Stephanie directly. And again, Stephanie, thank you so much for your time today and being a
Thank you.
guest on our show.
Thank you so much for having me. I knew we were going to have a good time, Emily.
Of course, we always do. Of course. Well, again, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and we'll chat soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
As I reflect on this conversation with Stephanie, I keep coming back to something she said that really struck me. We were born to do this. She was talking about how children naturally ask questions, listen, and connect with people who are different from them, and how somewhere along the way we lose that instinct. But what gives me hope is that Stephanie proved we can find our way back to it, and not just for feel-good reasons, but because the data is clear. Diverse teams are 70% more likely to capture new markets, 35% more productive, and 70% more innovative. 3 things from today that I hope will stay with you. First, that leadership starts with curiosity. Are you curious enough to drive 10 minutes instead of flying 10 hours to experience different perspectives? Second, that psychological safety isn't soft, it's strategic. especially in industries where failure isn't an option. And third, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do as a leader is simply observe your own meetings and ask, what voices, what perspectives, what ways of thinking are missing from this room? Stephanie's journey from baggage room to boardroom reminds us that transformation is possible, but it requires intentionality. Her ALLY framework, ask, listen, learn, and take action, isn't just about being a better leader, it's about creating the conditions where everyone around you can thrive. If this conversation resonated with you, I encourage you to check out Stephanie's book, Ally Leadership, How to Lead People Who Are Not Like You, and her online Earn System training. You can connect with her at stephanieyoung.com. And remember, as Stephanie said, if you want to be a leader worth your salt in today's world, you must know how to lead people who are not like you. The world has changed, and you don't have an option. Thanks for listening to Talent Talks.